I was talking about disposition to conflict. That's another thing that you need to look at when you are trying to differentiate, a bad moment or a bad season from a bad marriage. And I'm saying that when we talk about bad moment or bad season, it means that it's a good marriage, but they're experiencing a bad season, experiencing a bad moment. So when you have conflicts, what is your disposition to conflict? Conflict, that your disposition means how do you see the conflict? How do you see the problem? You know, and I said something very key. I said, when it's a good marriage experiencing a bad season, your disposition to conflict is how do we solve this issue? Solving the issue is the most important thing to you. But when it is a bad marriage, winning the argument is the most important thing. Also, pertaining your disposition, to conflict in a good marriage, you have there's always the presence of remorse. When somebody sees that they have done something wrong, that's because they have looked inward to say, okay, I said something wrong or I did something wrong, right? There's remorse. "Ah, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that." There is remorse. And then there is a desire to repair things, to repair the damage that has been caused. There's a desire for things, to fix things again. But when it's a bad marriage, there's no desire to fix things. There's no remorse. I said what I said. If you want to go and die, go and die. No remorse. No thinking about, oh, the impact of my words or my behavior. How did it make this person feel? Nothing like that. If the person wants to go and hug transformer, you should go and hug transformer. If they want to die, they want to hit their head on, you don't care. That's the disposition. Conflict is a time where you don't care. You're not looking for how things will be whole again, how to make up. It's as if during conflict time, you are happy that there is conflict because you don't even want this person in the first place. So, conflict is a great time to just keep this person away from you. Disposition to conflict is one of the ways you can look at differentiating a bad moment. There's a good marriage having a bad moment from a bad marriage. Also, another thing to look at as you try to differentiate between a bad marriage and a bad moment is recovery from conflict. How does the relationship recover from conflict? How long does it take until there is peace and there is settlement after the conflict? How long does it take? Now, when it's a good marriage that is experiencing a bad season, you see that during conflict, the conflict is, it doesn't last too long. Why? Because the couple are intentional. They want to fix things as soon as possible. So it doesn't last too long. There are couples that decide, within themselves, that I think it was Mommy and Daddy Adeboye, we read about them, and it said, and what we read, I think it was Open Heavens or so. It says that they both decided that they will not be angry at the same time. So while one person is angry, the person is venting, the person is angry, the person is expressing the other person. No, you cannot get angry at that. There's no way to differentiate between a good marriage experiencing season from a bad marriage is to look at the recovery. What is the recovery like after conflict? I was saying you look at how long does it take for them to settle. A good marriage, a bad marriage, how long does it take for them to settle? We're trying to tell the difference between a good marriage experiencing a bad season or a bad moment and a bad marriage. What is the recovery like? You have conflict, you have challenges. How long does it take before there is settlement, before there is peace? And we're saying in a good marriage, you see that they are quick to resolve things. Why? Because they are intentional that we don't want this thing to linger. We don't want this thing to last too long. We want to be able to come back together again and move on. Also, when it's a good marriage, you see that there are apologies, there are conversations, there is reconciliation. Come, let's reason together. Let's sit, let's talk this thing out, and let's us reach, an a middle ground somehow, right? So there is the desire to reconcile. Yeah. Also, when we're looking at a good um marriage experiencing a bad season, you see that the good marriage, they pursue reconciliation, they pursue repair, as it were. They want to fix things, The desire to fix things is there. They pursue peace. That's what Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews 12:14, that says, pursue peace, follow peace with all men. In a good marriage, when they experience bad seasons, they want to pursue peace. They want to pursue peace. They want to pursue repair. They want to be able to fix things. Also, they want the problems to be addressed. Now, permit me to dwell on this for a while, right? There's a difference between addressing a problem and just moving on. A lot of times people don't address problems. They just want to move on. What do I mean move on? Okay, move on now in the sense, and this is what is destroying a lot of relationships. When I'm talking relationship now, I'm talking about people that are not even married, singles who are in relationships. You see that most of the times you and your partner, you have an issue, right? Now that issue has not been resolved. That issue has not been, you have not settled, you have not talked it out. It's not as if you have not talked at all. You have talked, but you have not talked it out. You have not reached a conclusion, right? That issue, there's no headway yet. But what do? You want to just bury things under the carpet. You want to just move on. You want to just have makeup sex and then continue to live your life as if nothing happened. No, talk it through. Talk it through. Reach a particular place where, see, there is a way to have a conversation where the both of you will be healed. Not that the conversation is, the problem is ignored or the problem is denied. No, you talk through it until you get to conclusion, until there is clarity. That is when you can say, okay, you are trying to solve the problem. You talk through it until you heal. It's not just let's just have sex and just move on. No. And this is what is destroying a lot of relationships. A lot of things are unresolved, but because you have sex, you think everything is good. Just move on. No. So in good marriages, when they experience bad seasons, they address the problem. They talk through it. They reach a conclusion. And then based on the things that have been revealed now, they can now say, okay, I'm sorry for what I have done. Right? They can now reconcile. And that is when you move on. But when it's a bad marriage, they try to bury issues, or they try to ignore it, or they try to deny it. They just try to push it somewhere. It's just like that animal. There's this bird, I think is it the flamingo or ostrich? When there's danger, it buries its head in the sand. As I'm not seeing it, as I'm not talking about it, then it's not there. No, it is there. It is there. So when we are looking at differentiating a good marriage going through a rough season from a bad marriage, we want to look at how does the recovery after conflict, how does it happen? And we're saying that if it's in a good marriage experiencing a bad moment, we see that they are quick and intentional about making up. Yeah. Also, we see that they pursue peace. They want it to work. They want things to work. They want to be able to come back together as soon as possible. Also, they address the problems. They don't just sweep it under the carpet. But in a bad marriage, they tend to avoid the problems. Let's not talk about it. Let's just move on. Let's just. All right. Also, how do you tell the difference between a good marriage experiencing a bad season from a bad marriage? You look at the aftermath of conflicts. What that means now is that after the conflict, do things improve? Are there genuine changes? I'm not talking about the promise to change. Are there genuine changes? Sometimes you see maybe a couple, they have issues, and this person is complaining about this thing that you used to do. I don't like it, blah blah blah. And then the other person says, okay, I will try. And then the first day, they say they promise to change. Let me take an instance. Maybe someone who is abusive, maybe used to beat his wife, for instance. And then there was this story of one woman like that on Facebook. I think that was about 2 years ago. I watched the video. And then this lady was talking about how her husband used to beat her and all of that. And so whenever it will happen, she would take her things and then go back to her father's house. And then after a while, the man will leave her there for maybe some weeks. After a while, the man will come with his people to her father's house. They will beg, we will not beat your daughter again, blah, blah, blah. The girl will return back with the man. Maybe for like 1 or 2 weeks, the man will try to, just control his temper. But before you know what, he has beaten her again. So that became a cycle. He beat her, she goes to her father's house. The man will carry his people, go and beg, bring her back, beat her again, she goes to her father's house. Just became a cycle, just like that. So what am I trying to say? You want to be able to tell this is a good marriage or this is a bad marriage, look at how do things continue after our conflict. Is there genuine change? Or the person just promises to change, but then they still go back doing those things that you complained about. In fact, many a times, what happens is that people don't change. They just get smarter on how to do that same thing without being caught. Let me give an instance now, maybe like infidelity, for instance. Maybe the wife or the husband caught his wife cheating, right? And then that moment was very rough and all of that. But somehow they were able to walk through that season. The woman says, oh, I will not cheat on you again. They settle, they move on. A lot of times you see that that woman that said she will not cheat again, she will cheat again. But this time, she wants to do it in such a way that, it's not like the last time that they caught me. The person will want to act smarter. The person will want to do some things to change, how they were operating the last time. That's when you see some people. I've seen there was one video I was watching about a couple where the man had a second phone that the wife knew nothing about. So all the while the man would just be at home. Nobody calls that his phone. So the woman felt safe. She felt like, oh, this man has changed, this and that. Only to discover much later that the man had another phone. What am I trying to say? When you want to tell that this is a good marriage that's going through a rough season or a bad marriage, look at the things that happen after the conflict. Is there genuine change? Is this person really genuinely changing? Or they are just finding a way? They don't change, only promise to change, but they don't really change. Also, is there growth? Is there growth? Can you see growth? In a good marriage experiencing a bad moment, there is growth, visible growth over time. Over time, you see that, oh, you are not as bad tempered as you used to be. You can see that you rate more than you used to do. You can see that, oh, you don't throw tantrums so easily again. You can see some level of growth. That's a good marriage. Growth. We'll come to growth because the most important factor to be able to tell this is a good marriage and this is a bad marriage is growth. Is the most important factor. Is growth, because the truth is nobody enters into marriage 100% prepared, 100% ready with everything that it requires of them to make that marriage succeed. Nobody goes into marriage 100% ready, prepared. Nobody. It is as we journey through marriage that we begin to load ourselves with more knowledge, more experience, more awareness, more wisdom, right? Then as we are journeying, we are learning, we are becoming better. Nobody starts marriage and they are better from the beginning. Is a lie, right? So the evidence that, oh, this is a good marriage is that there's growth. So after conflict, after the issues we had the last time, is there growth? Is there, are there changes, genuine changes? Not that you are promising to change or you are showing me that you have changed, but you're still doing the same thing but in a different way. No. So that's how you're able to tell a good marriage having a bad season from a bad marriage. Also, you see that in a good marriage, challenges strengthen the marriage. They come out from that experience stronger, better, wiser, more informed about each other, right? But in a bad marriage, hey, it's about the damage. This one is not about I'm learning anything, I'm taking no. The marriage is just damaged. Rah. It's not about lessons learned. No, it's about the damage that has happened. The issues will keep repeating themselves. No genuine change, no effort to improve. You promise to change, but you not change. No growth. In certain marriages, bad marriages, there's no growth. That thing you have been complaining of, oh, is still happening. No growth. You are just learning to endure each other. No growth. So the aftermath of conflicts, looking at what happens after our conflict, are there changes, are there improvements? This is another way for you to tell if you are in a good marriage experiencing a bad moment or you are in a bad marriage. Also, the emotional connection. What is the emotional connection between you and your partner? In a good marriage, there is emotional connection. That closeness is there, that intimacy is there. And even if there is some kind of emotional disconnection or emotional withdrawal, it is usually for a reason. So it is e.g., maybe pressure. As a man, you see some men will tell you that. I watched a video recently. The man was they were lying down in the bed with his wife, you know, and then later the wife was talking to the man. He seemed to be lost in thoughts. And then, the woman tapped the man and she was complaining. Oh, this is how many months you have not touched me. Oh, you don't talk to me again. Oh, you don't do this. You don't do that. Is it that you're seeing another woman? Blah, blah, blah. The man was just ranting and venting and talking. And then the man just calmed her down and said, look, there is no other woman. I'm just facing a lot of pressures. And the woman was like, okay, what are the pressures you are facing? It turned out that the man recently lost his job, and so he found himself in a, a situation where he used to provide for the family, right? But right now he could no longer provide for his family. His wife was the one doing everything. And it was hurting him that it made him to feel like he was less of a man.